Good evening and welcome to the December 2nd, 2021 Sustainability Commission meeting. To help slow the transmission of COVID-19 and protect the health and safety of the community, City Council, as well as board and commission meetings, will continue to be closed to the public for in-person attendance. The public is encouraged to watch and participate from the safety of their homes to practice social distancing. Meetings are broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable, Channel 6, and AT&T Uverse, Channel 99. Meetings are also streamed live in high definition on the city's webpage, glendaleca.gov/live, on youtube.com/myglendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Amazon Fire devices using a free app called ScreenWeave and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. For public comments and questions during the meeting, call 818-937-8100. Public comments on a specific agenda item will be taken when that agenda item is discussed. And with that, let's move to roll call.
Commissioner Kartunian,
Present.
Khanjan,
Here.
Pinkerton,
Here.
Vice Chair Werner, Ex Officio Gang,
Here.
Ex Officio Prado, and Chair Bartosov.
Here. Okay, let's move on to Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Next item.
Item 1B, the agenda for December 2, 2021 meeting of the Sustainability Commission was posted on November 29, 2021 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next item.
Next item, item number 2, approval of minutes. 2A, approval of the minutes of the Commission regular meeting held on November 4, 2021.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments about the minutes?
I do.
I move to approve.
I have some comments on the minutes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Let's see, let me find where it is here. On page, oh, darn. Oh, there it is. Okay, page 3. It mentioned that lead codes focus on construction of the building, but not on the daily operations. That is not true. So I don't know how that got in there, but there's even a certification category called LEED O&M, which is for operations and maintenance. So a building could theoretically not be built with LEED building standards and still qualify for LEED O&M if it has, if they do things like use green cleaning products and optimize energy efficiency of the building through the mechanical system, things like that. There's a number of ways to get to that level. So I just wanted to clarify that. And also, and for things like reducing water use beyond certain benchmarks and so on too. And giving occupants control over their temperature and lighting and things like that. So building occupant satisfaction is a big part of that, but let me take this off because it's hard to speak. So also there's a common misperception that LEED is just a checklist of existing code requirements, but that actually is not the case. It's it's not a code and it's not a checklist, though sometimes checklists are used as tools. It's a system of prerequisites and credit categories that encourage collaboration early on in the planning of a new construction project or a major remodel or of building a hospital if it's in that category, for example. And it's for optimizing the building performance at a time when it's the most cost-effective and energy efficient to do so. For example, like how they orient the building is not something you could change halfway through design. So, but if you get the right people together in the room, so a lot of it's about early collaboration. They even give points for that. So I just wanted to throw that out there since it actually made it into the minutes incorrectly. Other than that, I did not have any other comments.
Chair, I have a response and comments, if I may.
Yeah, sure. And just a reminder, we're just focused on the minutes. So do you have corrections to the
No,
minute?
of course, of course.
Okay.
I think, yeah, those were my comments, but I think in the future, if we want to address statements that were made that each of us feels are inaccurate, maybe we need to come up with a policy for addressing that, because the vice chair made several comments that I feel are erroneous. People who drive EVs don't support roads. People with solar don't pay as much for utilities, so they don't contribute much to supporting the utility infrastructure. So just wanted to make the comment, those were my comments, but all of her statements were not captured in the minutes. So that's something we might have to address going forward. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so the minutes are precisely that, just to capture the comments of the commissioners as they were made. And if there is a topic that comes out of the minutes that needs to be discussed and agendized, that can be done according to the regular process. But normally, these are fairly extensive minutes. Usually they're a summary of comments, that there were commissioner comments that covered a broadly described topic. So I just wanted to advise the commission that this is fairly extensive for a set of minutes, which is supposed to be a summary, and they are just to capture the individual comments of commissioners as they were made. So thank you very much. And they can be approved by unanimous consent or with a vote.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments or notes about the minutes? If there are none, do we have a motion to approve the minutes? With, I guess,
Yeah, with,
Rondi's comment
corrected.
about that statement about lead.
So moved.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Thank you. Let's do a roll call.
Commissioner Kartunian? Yes. Khanjan?
Yes.
Pinkerton?
Yes.
Vice Chair Werner?
Yes.
Chair Bartusov?
Yes. Thank you. Let's move on to the next item.
Next item on the agenda, item number 3, board member and staff comments.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from staff?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments from commissioners?
I was wondering about the outcome of the biogas project. I believe it went to city council on Tuesday.
Yes, Chair Badrasuf, members of the Sustainability Commission, it was scheduled for a hearing on appeal from the Planning Commission's decision not to approve the conditional use permit and request for special recreation permit, and also for council's consideration of the certification of the environmental impact report and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. They held a hearing that evening, which went over just past midnight, and at the conclusion of the hearing, a motion was made to approve, to overturn the decision of the Planning Commission in order to approve the CUP and SSR permit requests, and to adopt a resolution to certify, and it was adopted after midnight. So that would have been, I guess, December 1st by a vote of 3-2.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Any other commissioner comments? I had a couple of notes, and I guess if this is something that I would want agendized at a later meeting, this would be the time to bring that up, I assume. So a couple of things that I think would be helpful for the Sustainability Commission to chime in on is how City Council makes decisions on budget and funding. And I would specifically like to look into and see when it would be appropriate for staff to come to our commission on ways in which we could allocate money either through the general fund or through various pots like Measure S, specifically allocated for sustainability initiatives. So I would like for, if we get a second from the commission, my fellow commissioners, to have this be agendized at an appropriate time when the commission can advise council on how to spend their dollars as it pertains to sustainability initiatives.
I'll second that. Or move that.
Thank you, Jennifer. David, do you have a comment?
I do. Chairman Baltrasuf and the Sustainability Commission, in discussions with staff, and Gillian will chime in and correct me or add to what I say. It is mainly the purview of the City Council to discuss and allocate budgets for the city. The Sustainability Commission may recommend through their work plan and work, for example, on what they want to see done through the Climate Action Plan, for example, that certain projects within the Climate Action Plan they would recommend to the City Council that maybe funding should be directed to some of those strategies and some of those issues within the Climate Action Plan. We have 13 boards and other commissions, so if one commission or board would be part of the budgeteering process, that means all other boards and commissions would have to have that same opportunity. So in terms of efficiency and the city working, that's probably not the most efficient way. We do, through the budget process, have information sessions with City Council, where each department will come in front of City Council and talk about their budget requests. And City Council has the opportunity at that point to ask staff. As commissioner members, you may discuss your concerns with your council member who appointed you and get your voices concerned through that channel. And also, as a resident, you can potentially call into the meeting to make your points of view heard. So at this point in time, there is no avenue for the Commission to be directly involved through the budgeting process.
Thank you for your comments on that. I don't necessarily agree with that approach. I think as a commission, we are here to advise council on issues that pertain to sustainability. And to be frank with everybody that's listening, we need dollars allocated to programs and initiatives to move forward on our climate action initiatives and an eventual plan that's going to be adopted. Sure, we can advise on the plan itself, but ultimately that does not even include a budgetary allocation for those initiatives to be implemented. And a perfect example of that that the city recently underwent is the pedestrian plan, which outlines exhaustively all of the ways in which the plan can be implemented through various funding streams and has a host of recommendations on how to get the plan implemented. But not much of that has materialized. And I think part of that comes down to accountability. And I think this commission is well suited to advise council on how to spend money that the city has on various initiatives. And a specific measure is Measure S. When we went to the voters asking for their approval, one of the specific items under Measure S was to achieve sustainability initiatives for the city of Glendale. And if it's inappropriate for this commission to advise on something like that, then I'm hard pressed to fully understand our real objective here. So that's what kind of rubs me the wrong way when I hear that kind of strategy. I really would like for this commission to take a formal advisory role on next year's Measure S allocations, or next year's, another example is Measure M. Metro local dollars to the city of Glendale is in the millions of dollars. And our commission, in theory, would never hear how the city is spending those dollars, when in fact, a lot of that is supposed to be utilized for sustainability purposes, to get people onto public transit, to get people to be able to walk and bike in our city. So I guess I want to challenge that, and happy to hear your thoughts as a rebuttal to that, but I'm hoping that I could get a formal second on this regardless.
I'm glad to second that, Alec. And also, I do have a question for David, and apologize for not knowing this. Is the city on a fiscal or calendar year budget schedule?
The city's on a fiscal year budget schedule.
Okay, so, all right, so the next budget goes into effect July 1st. When does the budgeting or discussion process start for the following fiscal year?
From memory, I believe the budget planning sessions start in May, April, May. But I can confirm that and get back to you.
2022 then. Okay. I have to agree with Alec, dealing with this dilemma in the city of LA. We have, for example, zero waste goal, Green New Deal, but not actual funds. And this is for many years past, and this is the first year that we do have funds to work with, because a lot of these measures do require expenditure. So I agree, maybe we need to go before the council, Alec, and make a request to get agendized and make a presentation about this.
That you can do that individually. You can get in front of council and make a request. I know we're going to have this discussion later on, but also through the work plan is another opportunity for the commission to highlight their priorities, get that information in front of council, and through that work plan process and identifying your priorities with the council members, that may be an opportunity to let council know what is a priority for this commission. So that's another avenue of discussion you have with the city council when you go forward and then you present the work plan.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm imagining the way that this could go is, I do remember this during the last budget talks. I believe it was, I don't know if it was March or April or May, but the various city departments came to council to discuss essentially how Measure S funds could be utilized. And council directed each department on how those funds could be used. I think it would be relatively easy for staff to compile those notes from each department on how they would like, how each department would like Measure S funds allocated to them, and for our commission to simply react to that and advise council. I don't see how that would be inappropriate for our commission to chime in. I don't see how it would be much of a hurdle or challenge for the departments to compile those notes and share that with our staff here today, and would be, to me, a straightforward approach. But I do want to make sure that the commission is aware that these processes are happening on an annual basis, and we're simply just not part of it. And I think it would be it would be beneficial to council and for us to understand how our city budgets are allocated and what that means for sustainability in our city.
May I ask a question from the chair, if you don't mind?
This is not
Are
an
we-
agendized item.
Chair Bartosov, question, are you asking for this body to have decision-making power to make budgetary decisions, or simply to recommend to council how they should spend the Measure S?
Yeah, so I'll remind folks that may not be fully aware of our role here. We are simply here as an advisory body to the council. So I'm not a professional and do not want to get into budgeting, but our commission can make recommendations to council on how to spend our money. So it's just as we advise on a myriad of topics and take policy positions on items, we can easily do the same. And based on my understanding of our bylaws and how we're formed, we can advise on anything that we want. And in my opinion, that includes the city's budget. And so I'm here today to appeal to my fellow commissioners that we should take on that role.
So just for Chairman Bartosov from the Sustainability Commission, just for clarification, that process you described just now, that's an administrative process, which is in the purview of the city manager. So I just want to make that clear.
I'm sorry, can you clarify which process?
Of the budget process is an administrative process, which is under the purview of the city manager. The actual budgeting process, how the city goes about establishing its budget, undertaking its budget, and going through that whole process. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Okay. Okay. Yes, Rondi.
Yes, I agree with you. I think we should have some budget that we can work with. Like, for example, the Earth Day celebration, the first question we ask is, what's the budget for it? And it's like, oh, I don't know. And then we're asked to come up with a plan. Again, what's the budget? I don't know. And so it makes it very difficult to even plan something as simple as a Earth Day event without knowing what, if any, funds are going to be available. So it's, I think it's putting their money where their mouth is. Do they want a Green or Glendale or not? It's not going to come free, and they need to pony up something on that. So I'd be willing to support that.
Vice Chairperson Werner, it's not a question of that. I think it's a question of commissions having a role in the budgetary process and being able to spend budgetary funds. And, no commissions have that. The commissions aren't assigned budgets.
Right, but
essence.
as individuals, like you said before, like at the beginning of every council meeting, the public can speak for 3 minutes on an item that's not on the agenda, or for 5 minutes after the business ends on something also that isn't on the agenda. So I encourage commission members to do that and to take Mr. Jones' advice and speak with the commission or the city council member that appointed them and see if they can get buy-in on that.
So what happens now? We have an idea has been brought forward with a second. So I understand there's resistance from staff. Does this mean the item would in fact be agendized, or is this something that staff can look into and report back? Where do we take it from here?
Chairman Bartosov, I'm not giving you resistance. I'm just letting you know the process. I don't know whether it can be agendized.
A discussion of the funding for purposes of carrying out the roles of the Sustainability Commission is certainly a discussion you can have. In terms of the commission's involvement with the actual budgeting process, that is within the purview of the legislative body. With respect to priorities that the commission would like the council to undertake and to fund, that is definitely a recommendation that the commission can make. Such, and the Earth Day celebration activities are certainly an example. Part of that recommendation would be to ensure that there is sufficient funding for that to be undertaken in the way as recommended. That is definitely within the purview of the commission to make those forms of recommendations. But in terms of the balancing and the administrative decision-making process and whether or not departments can be directed by the Sustainability Commission, for example, through that motion, to come and provide budgetary information to the Sustainability Commission, that is, I think, why Mr. Jones indicated that directing departments to do that is within the purview of the city manager and not within individual commissions. So, and I think what you were saying as well, it has to do with once the priorities are set and the work plan is adopted and in place and those priorities are provided to the city council, the requisite funding, with a request for the requisite funding in order to carry out those priorities, that's where where that emphasis would be most productive for purposes of getting whatever, whether it be Measure S or other forms of funding or Metro funding that might be available out there to fulfill these goals, to bring it to their attention and make these recommendations for funding. I think that's what you were saying, yeah.
Correct. Thank you, Julian.
Yeah, and I guess there are going to be years that will pass by the time the climate action plan is adopted. Very well, maybe this coming budget year and next budget year. And we have limited time as commissioners on this commission to advise council. And that is why I feel, climate action plan aside, we should be advising council on the ways in which they're allocating funding as it relates to sustainability initiatives. So perhaps, you have the formal motion and second. Maybe I'll have to talk to the city manager or our respective council members to see what is the most appropriate way for the commission to chime in. But I'm sticking to my guns here on this one and want to make sure that we're being proactive on this approach.
I have a question. Is the Community Development Block Grant Program a potential source of funds for some of these initiatives?
That's a very good question, Commissioner. I don't have that information right now, but I'll get back to you with an answer on that.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments? All right, let's move on to the next item.
Next item number 4, all communications. Discussion is limited to items within the jurisdiction of the Sustainability Commission. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Sustainability Commission members may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to staff for investigation and report. At this time, we do not have any college chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next item.
Item 5, reports and information. 5A, En-ROADS Climate Change Solution Simulator.
Good evening, Chairman Buttress and Sustainability Commission. So this subject, the En-ROADS program, was brought to staff's attention by Councilmember Brockman. And Councilmember Brockman thought it was important for the Commission to understand what this program is about, especially in terms as we go forward with our climate action plan and how this program may help in us looking at different mitigation strategies and the appropriate policy decisions. So I'd like to introduce 2 speakers today who will talk about and educate and inform the Commission about the En-ROADS program. That is Mr. George Fine and Miss Polly Estabrook. So if you could bear with me as I read the biographies. Mr. Vine retired in 2016 from a financial consulting practice centered on community development, investors and lenders. While he served as Chief Credit Officer for one of his clients, CCRC, Mr. Vine approved mortgages for the construction of over 25,000 units of affordable housing in California. Mr. Vine now devotes his time to issues of climate change and democratic politics. He is certified by the environmental think tank, Climate Interactive as a climate ambassador to facilitate climate workshops using Climate Interactive's En-ROADS Climate Simulator, developed jointly with Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Mr. Vine has a master's degree in urban planning from UCLA and a bachelor's degree in architecture from the Rhode Island School of Design. And I'll let the commission members introduce themselves after this. Ms. Polly Eastbrook. Polly is an electrical engineer specializing in radio communications for near-Earth and deep space missions. Over the last 25 years, Polly has worked at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. Polly has had the incredible fortune to contribute to research and development tasks, Mars rovers, and on a mapping satellite to survey Earth's surface water. As the science around climate change has become ever more comprehensive and the impact of global warming more apparent, Polly has become active in supporting local and national policies to curb greenhouse gases, support the health of our planet's ecosystems, and ensure environmental justice. Last summer, Polly took Climate Interactive's En-ROADS climate simulation training, and in September 2021, became an En-ROADS climate ambassador. So I'm very privileged to introduce Polly and George to the commission, and I'll let them describe this tool that they're talking about.
If you would like, George and I thought I would start off with a short description of our CO2 emissions over time and the climate issue that we now face. And then George will start talking about En-ROADS.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, then if that's okay, I will share my screen. Okay, please let me know if you can see my screen. It doesn't look, yeah, can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
We can see it, Polly.
Okay, so I wanted to thank you very much for the kind introduction. George and I have also given a few classes at CSUN, and we have used En-ROADS to play games with the students. And what I like to always talk about is that at JPL, we try to use our knowledge, our ingenuity, and our creativity to build the next generation planetary unmanned vehicles. And now it's time for us to take this same knowledge and ingenuity and creativity and focus it on our planet, our home planet, Earth. And so this is, again, what motivates George and I to come speak with you today. Now, hopefully I can get to the next chart. I'm sure you know all of this, but I always like to start this off as kind of the motivation for why this is so important. And this is just a plot of CO2 emissions from the last more or less million years that we have from ice cores. And this data is from NASA. And you can see that the CO2 emissions have varied from 180 parts per million up to about 300. And that it takes about 100,000 years for it to go up and back down and up and down. And we see these cycles, which now many scientists believe have to do with the wobble of the planet's axis. And then I like to point out that Homo sapiens arrived around 300,000 years ago. And so we, as a new species, we did develop, we grew, and we also shrank. And our population did not monotonically rise, but we suffered, we grew and we shrank down to very small numbers. And then for a reason, probably during a time when CO2 emissions were very flat, and thereby the temperature of the global temperature, not the yearly temperature, but global temperature was fairly flat, we began to create civilizations. And Sumer existed about 3,000 years, this should be corrected, I'm sorry, it's supposed to be an 8. It's about 7 to 7,000 years ago, or around 5,000 years BC. And now you can see CO2. We're going into a region that, although Homo erectus has seen that type of CO2, well, it could have existed during the time of Homo erectus. Homo sapiens, we have never seen this in our existence. So I'd just like to point out that this is definitely a new period of time, and that this CO2, as we all know, causes the sun's energy not to escape the atmosphere, but instead to be reflected, and creates warming of our planet, of which 2/3 of the heat is absorbed by the ocean. But now, and we've seen, of course, ocean acidification. And now we're seeing the effects as it starts to warm our planet itself. So I just wanted to start with these very basic charts, and then talk a little bit about the temperature rise since 1850, which is one we usually call the pre-industrial times. And you can see that we have two different historical data sets, but they track each other very well. And we are now in the year, this chart only goes to 2010, but now in the year 2021, we are at about 1.2 degrees above the 1850 levels. So as you all know, we're trying with the United Nations, with the United Nations climate conferences, our goal is to keep the global temperature rise to less than 2 degrees C by 2100, with a goal of 1.6 degrees C maximum. And we've all seen the impacts of increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We've seen global temperature rise, we've seen ocean acidification, sea level rise, changing ecosystems leading to species extinction, extreme weather in California, of course, that has to do with fires, and in other parts of our country, more severe storms and droughts in the entire Pacific Northwest, and increasing pollution caused by the burning of fossil fuels. So the number one thing that we need to address is we must curb our greenhouse gases in order to reduce this blanket that is basically around our planet, causing the temperature to rise. And with that, I want to talk about that one of the most important ways to do this is with our own personal actions, but more importantly, with legislation. And Glendale has been a leader in trying to get its electrical plant to move to the use of 100% renewables. And there are many outstanding things that the Glendale City Council and the Glendale community have done. And hopefully En-ROADS can be perhaps used for your Sustainability Commission to help with the next set of legislation that you wish to do. And with that, I want to turn the floor back over to George, who's going to bring up the En-ROADS simulator.
Thank you, Keith. Can everybody see this simulator dashboard?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So this simulator, this climate simulator was developed by Climate Interactive, a think tank, and MIT, based on the best available science. And it was calibrated to the major integrated assessment models used by universities and labs around the world. And the results that it shows are like basically right in the middle of the results that are shown by these.
Sorry, excuse me, I apologize, George. We seem to have a big gray hashed square on the screen. I don't know whether that's your end or our end.
Oh, I see that, yes. Oh dear. That's my notes. Those are my notes. Let me, oh man, let me print them off and then I'll resume. Sorry about that. I'll be right back. I'm afraid I'm not that familiar with WebEx. Most of our work has been on Zoom. As I was stating, though, the climate simulator was developed and it was calibrated against the major integrated assessment models. It was also calibrated against historical climate change from 1990 to roughly 2020. And so that's why we have confidence that the results in the simulator are at least the best that we can do. It includes over 14,000 ordinary differential equations that are designed to react immediately. So it acts in real time to changes in policies that we would choose to implement. Unlike those major big integrated assessment models, which may take several days to a week or even longer to run a scenario. If we look at the dashboard up here, starting on the left side, it shows the global sources of primary energy. And this is from the year 2000 to the year 2100. And it shows that and this is what's called a business as usual scenario. It assumes that we continue on the way we're going, which is taking some climate measures, but not really attacking this full on like we need to do. This isn't a projection, but it is just an assumption of what happens if we don't do anything more than what we're doing now. You can see that energy use from coal continues to increase, as well as from oil and gas. All the fossil fuels increase between 2000 and 2100 pretty much monotonically. You also see that renewables, the green, increase as well, and that's because they've just become so cheap, and they are expected to get cheaper and to take a larger and larger share of the total primary energy source. And then finally, we have bioenergy in pink and nuclear in blue, which is assumed to not grow by very much, which is the case right now anyway. And you can see that the results of business as usual is a temperature increase by 2100 of 3.6 degrees Celsius. And the graph on the right, at the upper right, shows the Paris Accords targets, which were a maximum of 2 degrees centigrade and hopefully getting a lot closer to 1.5. And you can see that we will pretty much blow through those, blow through 1.5 in 2030 and blow through 2 degrees in 2048 or so. Under the business as usual scenario. So our goal today is to create a climate scenario that keeps us within the Paris Accords, i.e. below 2 degrees centigrade and hopefully a lot closer to 1.5. And the bottom part of this dashboard shows the policy levers that we have to affect where we end up, starting with energy supply all the way over on the left. We see coal, oil, natural gas, the fossil fuels. We can either subsidize them or we can tax them. with these levers. So for example, coal, we can tax it very highly, and you can see the result on the graph on the upper left. Coal basically drops and still maintains quite a bit of energy as an energy source, but drops it quite a bit lower than it was. And you can see that that contributes to reducing the temperature rise, but it gets us nowhere near where we need to be. So I have another little WebEx thing here that is I can't get to my I can't get to the things in the graph. Anyway, so in addition to the fossil fuels, we have bioenergy, renewables, nuclear, which we can also subsidize or tax. We even have a new zero carbon energy source, and who knows what that could be. It could be thorium fission, or it could be nuclear fusion, or it's just it's there for an energy no carbon energy source that is a new technology that we don't have right now. And then finally, there is a carbon price. So we can put a price on carbon and charge a tax against carbon from all sources, coal, oil, and natural gas, at the wellhead or at the port or at the mine or at the well. And that corresponds with a number of legislative initiatives that are in Congress right now. Actually, there's several carbon pricing bills in the House right now, trying to make it through the Congress, but with prospects that are not very good. Then in the middle, the policy levers that we have in the middle include transportation. We can increase the efficiency of transportation. That's bike lanes and mass transit and clean fuel standards, things like that are going to increase the efficiency of transportation. We can also electrify it, which is just basically electric cars, electric trucks, electric ships, even electric aviation. For example, if we were to crank transport electrification up as high as we can go, you can see the effects that has. It reduces fossil fuel use a little bit, but not a whole lot, and it reduces the ultimate temperature a little bit, but not a whole lot. And we'll talk about that later, some more about that later. We can do the same thing with buildings and industry. Energy efficiency, we can add insulation to buildings. We can increase the efficiency of furnaces. We can put on reflective roofs, things like that. Or we can electrify buildings. We can replace natural gas furnaces with heat pumps. We can replace natural gas hot water heaters with heat pump hot water heaters. We can replace our gas ranges, which create an enormous amount of indoor pollution, just by the way, with induction ranges. And then finally, to the extent that we have policies to address population growth and economic growth, we can make changes there as well. And then finally, all the way over on the right, we have land and industry emissions. First one is deforestation. We can stop the deforestation that's going on in Brazil, for example, and in other places. And that would have an effect We can also, and the next one over on the right is methane and others. So methane is another greenhouse gas. We talked mostly about CO2, but methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. It's about 80 times as potent as CO2, but it doesn't last in the atmosphere as long. So within decades, it will be taken out of the atmosphere through chemical reactions, whereas carbon dioxide, it may take centuries or millennia to get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And then finally, there's carbon removal. Afforestation means planting new forests and having the resulting tree growth absorb carbon from the atmosphere. And then technological carbon removal is like carbon capture and sequestration, taking carbon directly out of the smokestacks of industrial processes or even directly from the air itself. So we have all these opportunities to change our trajectory. Another thing I wanted to show was that we have this model has a lot of assumptions, and we can change these assumptions if we believe that maybe some of the assumptions that the model developers made are not accurate. And for example, the major assumption that everybody talks about is climate sensitivity, which is how much the climate will warm with a doubling of CO2 concentration. And pretty much everybody agrees that that's 3 degrees C right now. But if for some reason we had a different idea, we could change that and the model would reflect those changes. And then to give you an idea of some of the other assumptions built into the model, I want to show you this series of Kaya graphs at the top. These graphs show that, well, let's start off with all the way to the left, global population. These show the model's assumptions with respect to population. So currently around 2021, we are close to 8 billion people on this planet. And the model projects that under business as usual, we'll end up at 2100 close to 11 billion people. And these are based on United Nations projections. The next graph over shows the GDP per capita. This is a measure of the economic development of the planet. So it starts off around $17,000 per capita. And we assume, the model assumes it'll go up to almost $65,000 per capita. And a lot of people use this as a reason for not doing anything because they say we'll be a lot richer in the future and a lot better able to attack this problem in the future as our GDP goes up so much. But the problem is we won't be able to do much because by then the concentration of CO2 will be so high that we'll be in a catastrophic situation. The next graph over shows the energy intensity of GDP, how much energy it takes to produce the GDP. And it shows that we expect the economy, the planetary economy, to get a lot more efficient between now and 2100, going from 3 exajoules per $1 trillion of GDP down to 1.3 exajoules of energy per $1 trillion. So the model is assuming that we're getting continually more efficient. And then finally, there's the carbon intensity of final energy. And again, the model assumes that we get a lot better that way, just under the business as usual scenario, going from 91 megatons of CO2 per exajoule of energy all the way down to 69 megatons. And if you take these 4 graphs and you multiply them together, you end up with the CO2 emissions from energy. And that starts off in 2020 at 38 gigatons of CO2 per year is what we're putting into the atmosphere. And we anticipate that's going to go up to 64 gigatons of CO2 under the business as usual scenario. So what are the effects of that? What are the implications of this business as usual scenario? If you look at air pollution, this is PM 2.5. It shows that we are putting out 23 megatons of PM 2.5 now. And this results in hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of premature deaths currently that we attribute to air pollution. And under the business as usual scenario, that is going to almost double and become 43 megatons of PM 2.5. I have no idea what the resulting premature deaths would be from that, but surely it's enormous. Another impact to look at is sea level rise. It's anticipated to be about a meter of sea level rise, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but we can look at particular locations and see what that does. For example, San Francisco. The blue areas are land that will be at risk of flooding in the year 2100. And I think if we look at San Pablo Bay, we can see that the cost of this are going to be enormous. Szechuan Bay, look at the flooding that is projected to occur in the Bay Area. It's going to be in the billions and billions of dollars to try to mitigate for that or adapt to that. And with the model, you can do this for many places, almost all the coastal cities around the globe. I just picked San Francisco because it was close to home. And then finally, the last thing I'd like to look at, the implication of this business as usual scenario, is on the impacts for species extinction. So you can see that this is a measure of the risk of species extinction, and it indicates the number or the percentage of various kinds of animal life and plant life that will face a reduction of their climatic range by 50% or more. And I mean, you can see the plants, insects, and invertebrates all are facing greater than 50% reduction in their climatic range. So the species extinction, I mean, we'll be well on our way to the 6th mass extinction by 2100 under business as usual.
George, you can click on show more there, and there'll be, I just want to make sure you know that the little English show more will give you a bigger graph.
Yeah. Bring it up. Yeah, thank you. So you can see the effect on, it's bad news. So now that we have a bit of an understanding about how this simulator works, so the question is, how can we come up with a scenario that results in a better outcome by 2100? So think about climate change mitigation actions that you've taken or that you believe would be helpful, or that you've heard about, or that your employer has undertaken or have read about, and just shout out. Let me know, what do you want to try? Does anybody have any suggestions?
My suggestion is going to
Maximize
be
electrification.
Electrification of
Yes.
transportation?
No, I'm sorry, buildings.
Oh, building.
Is that something Glenn was looking into?
Right. That's something I did. I got a heat pump in my house. Let's crank it all the way up. Let me get rid of this show more.
You can go back to your temperature.
Yeah, I know I can't get there because there's a little square blocking my.
God, it's weird. We see it perfectly. Maybe if you go back to the semicircle above, go back to the basics, the return to baseline. You'll get the baseline curves.
Yeah, right. No, I can't get to that either.
Wow, weird, George.
I know. Oh, okay. There we go. There we go. Okay. All right. So if we crank up building electrification all the way that this model will allow, we get down to 3.3 degrees in 2100. Now that is a contribution, but it's not huge. And I think even if we did transportation electrification all the way, we would get down to another 1/10 of a degree. Does anybody have any idea why that? I mean, intuitively, that doesn't seem very effective. And does anybody have any idea why that would be?
Well, if you don't change the source of the energy, transportation electrification is going to have a nominal effect. You got to change the source, how they're charging, where's the power coming from?
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly it. You can see over here that although we have increased renewables a lot by going to electricity and cutting back on fossil fuels by electrifying all this stuff, we're still generating electricity from fossil fuels. So that by itself is a contribution, but it's not enough. So does anybody have another suggestion?
Can we try the nuclear energy? I was recently at the Nuclear Science Museum in New Mexico, and I saw a display on these new micro-sized nuclear power plants that are very small and more affordable, and it just looked really promising.
Bill Gates is a big fan of that. Yes, let's crank nuclear all the way up. And what does that do? Well, it helps. It helps, but and I can replay that change. And let's look at what happens to the sources of energy as I replay that. What happens? You can see. This is one of the interesting things that this model demonstrates is that what happens if you subsidize nuclear. Well, you make nuclear energy a lot cheaper, and so we don't need as much energy from other sources. So what does it do? It cuts back the renewable energy, the other kinds of renewable energy, by subsidizing nuclear. It also cuts back fossil fuels, and that results in a slight reduction. But we're also cutting back in solar and wind power and hydro and other kinds of clean energy as well. So that's one of the interesting things that this model shows, that
Question.
it competes. Yes.
Question for you. Nuclear, though, as we all know, produces very dangerous product. The storage, look at the half-life of nuclear material. It is a zero carbon fuel, but it has incredible downsides. Do you account for that when you're doing these types of simulations?
This model doesn't account for the problems of nuclear waste. No,
Yep.
it doesn't. I think the assumption is we have 100 years to address this climate problem, and maybe we can work on the nuclear waste problem after 2100 if we are able to get the temperature down.
Do you really think we have 100 years? I've been talking to some PhDs from MIT, and they're saying major species and systems collapses within 30 years. Do we really have 100 years?
No, well, no, just for the purposes of this simulator,
Right.
it goes to
Right.
2100. Yeah, no. Yeah, I think as we go through this, you'll see that we have like 10 years to really to make sure that we keep fossil fuels in the ground if we want to get to these Paris Accord goals. Any other ideas on
George, I just wanted to speak to what your question was. If you click the three little dots, I don't know if you can do that because I know you're having issues with it, but you can see this model is very nice in that it can't talk about everything. However, if you click those three little dots by nuclear, you can see that it gives you a little bit of text for what is going to what are the pros and cons. And it says nuclear power production doesn't release CO2, but it produces waste that has to be managed for centuries. And so they try to, and they suggest also these related graphs. And so they're trying to show you that, it doesn't come for free. So it's exactly what George is showing. So one of the nice things about this guide is that they have thought quite a bit about the pros and cons of different sources. And though they may not be able to show that in a graph, they are trying to elicit discussion about it.
That's very helpful. Thank you for pointing that out. I do have one other question. A comment was made at a previous meeting that government should not be picking and choosing fuels or energy sources. Does this show, by any chance, we have almost a century of the government subsidizing fossil fuels. Is that embedded in here anywhere?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You can show the effect of eliminating those subsidies by
that would be great.
Yeah, by basically moving by basically taxing them a small amount to account for the subsidies.
Can we see that change? Because that's one of my I'm very dismayed that some additional oil leases are being allocated right now.
Yeah, I just made those changes, and this is the approximate amount. I didn't keep track of the temperature, so we're at 3.2, and if we eliminated all subsidies of fossil fuels, we could get down. It would be 1/10 of a degree by 2100. So it's not a huge impact, but it does seem pretty strange that we're subsidizing these fuels.
There is, to talk to Jennifer, to your question, I think when people say the government shouldn't be picking, one way to do that is to do what is currently in the Build Back Better plan, which is in the Senate right now, and it has a price on methane, and they were talking about putting a price on CO2 fuels, and so you can do that with a carbon price by therefore incorporating the externalities caused by the use of fossil fuels, and thereby increasing the price of fossil fuel based energy sources. So George can show you that, and that's kind of the opposite of picking things. You just let the market do the work by incorporating, as I just said, the externalities into the carbon price to correctly show what the issues with using carbon are, like increased pollution, for example.
Yes, and having already electrified transportation and buildings, what do you think a carbon price would do if we instituted, say, a high carbon price? Any suggestions on how far down that might get us?
Oh, no. It'll ramp up renewable usage, hopefully, significantly.
Yeah, and there's another graph that's helpful here, this one. So you can see greenhouse gas net emissions by gas shows you where the residual emissions are coming from. And you can see that energy CO2 is the bulk of it still, even with the electrification of buildings and transportation. And a carbon price would have a big impact on that, I believe. So let's try that out. Let's highly taxed carbon. And wow, that gets us
Wow.
a long way there, doesn't it? As it turns out, the carbon price is really the single most effective lever of all these 18 levers that we have. And I mean, you can see why there are so many places on the globe now that have a carbon price. And it would be a wonderful thing if we could get the US to institute a carbon price. California's already done it. I think the carbon price in California, if I remember right, is roughly $15 a ton, which is not that high, but it's something. The EU has a carbon price, and their carbon price is about $50 a ton, and the EU is the real leader.
I've read that ours is much too low, that it really is just moving credits around mostly, that it's not affecting much change. Do you agree with that?
In California, you mean? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think they are trying to ramp it up. I think they're working on it, but yes, right now it's not doing it.
They often have said that in California, we have a cap and trade. And people, there are wonderful things that have arisen from cap and trade. For example, Tesla accumulated a lot of money that it needed in its startup phase by trading its cars, by trading the zero carbon footprint of its cars for selling that to other car manufacturers. And that is what allowed Tesla to get the capital it needed to start up. So that was, it created the impetus to create innovative technologies. And also the Native Americans in Northern California have used that same cap and trade to take care of forests, and they've used the cap and trade money to build other industries. So it's been many good things have come from California's cap and trade, but on the other hand, it's encouraged certain industries to pollute in areas, to continue polluting in areas where there are high density populations. So it's obviously not been good all around.
Right. One question, water here is energy intensive because it has to be pumped. Is that in here anywhere? And also, what about agriculture? Energy usage in that sector?
Agriculture is definitely in here. I'm not sure about water. I don't
think so.
I've ever seen
Okay.
water, but agriculture is here under methane and other. And
Okay.
so you can see that, and we have the ability in this model of reducing agricultural and waste emissions, which is methane and, I don't know, Polly, what's N2O? Is that nitrous oxide or?
Yes.
And so we have the ability to affect agricultural waste emissions as well as energy and industry. And this is the primarily the leakage of methane from natural gas systems.
Right.
And you can model all that very specifically. But we need to get down below 2 degrees. Does anybody have any other suggestions of things that we should try?
Ramp up energy efficiency in all sectors.
Okay, we could do that. Energy efficiency in buildings. That is weird, isn't it? Look at that. If you replay it. So what all that seems to do is reduce the demand for energy without changing emissions at all. And I guess the reason for that is it really doesn't affect fossil fuels that much. It's affecting mostly the renewable energy. If you look over here, it's the green area that's shrinking the most.
You can see the impact in the degrees Fahrenheit, but not in the degrees centigrade, since it would be in the second digit, which isn't displayed.
Right. And then we could also increase transportation efficiency. And with between the two of them, we get down to 2.2. But what's the problem that we still have? And if you look at greenhouse gas net emissions, if you look at it looks like if we do all this, the biggest problem we have left is methane, the blue area. We're not doing anything to methane. And the Build, as Polly said, the Build Back Better program has a methane fee against it, doesn't it? So why don't we ramp down methane and see if we can get there with that? So I'll do that.
Plus,
We can
with
do
that SB 1383 diversion mandates, those just kick off in January. But yeah, I think it'll take a long time to see any effects because most cities are not up to speed with that yet.
Which ones did you say?
At SB 1383, it's the mandates for organics, diversion of organic materials from landfills.
I see.
And it goes into effect January 1st. And very aggressive goals. I don't think we're going to meet the first, the 2025 diversion goals at all. We're lacking 200 some processing facilities, but I think that'll have a big impact. It'll keep things out of landfills. Organics out of landfills.
One thing, George, I wanted to ask you if you could, on the chart on the right, if you could go back to greenhouse gas net emissions, but not by gas.
Okay.
I thought that the commission, just greenhouse gas net emissions, just that one big chart.
I see CO2 net emissions, but not greenhouse.
Okay, to the right of that, if you just click on that guy and make him big. Yeah.
All right.
Now, if you go under the three dots, you should be able to see what I find very interesting. This is the UN pledges from COP26. And if you click that thing, you see that what we've done is we're a little bit better than what COP26. That's why they're saying that COP26, it's a fine line whether you can get a tightrope to get to 1.5 degrees. And I think they're saying that because, as you can see, we've gotten a little better than the net pledges, but we're still headed towards 2 degrees C. So I think it shows how difficult it is to get down below 1.5, and how some people are disappointed with the pledges that were made at COP26. Just wanted to show you that the program has that little dot in there, but you can only see the dot if you go to that graph.
Yeah, that's good.
Take it off.
And just to, I think scientists are increasingly telling us that 2 degrees is not good enough. That will still have catastrophic impacts at 2 degrees even. So how do we get down to well below 2 degrees? Does anybody have? I mean, look at these graphs. What is the problem that we're not getting even lower? And you can see we're still using a fair amount of fossil fuels. We still have some methane that we're still using. How do we get down to well below 2 degrees? I think we've got 1 or 2 more steps to get there. Any suggestions?
Afforestation.
Afforestation. That's exactly right. I mean, the way to get down that, we have to suck stuff out of the atmosphere. And if you did afforestation at the beginning, it wouldn't have an impact at all. But at the end, it'll help a lot. So let's do that. Let's crank up afforestation. Okay, it didn't help a whole lot, but it did get us below 2.0. And then I think we need to, everybody is talking about carbon carbon capture and sequestration, especially for industrial processes that are really hard to decarbonize, such as cement and steel. You need to have carbon capture and sequestration. And if you have that, you can see, let me replay that. You can see the difference here with significant carbon capture and sequestration is we end up taking a fair amount of carbon out of the atmosphere. And that's what it takes to get us to 1.5. So congratulate yourselves, pat yourselves on the back. You come up with a scenario that meets the Paris Accords handsomely. So what have we learned from all this? And I'll just go over a few points. One, there's no silver bullet. It takes a host of actions to get us to where we need to be. Some of them are higher leverage than others. Carbon pricing is probably the highest leverage of all of them, but even it by itself is not enough, which I can show you. Get back to the business as usual scenario and then just crank up a carbon price. What does it do?
Wow.
You know, it helps a lot, but it doesn't get us to where we need to go. Timing and order of implementation matter, and it's critical to keep fossil fuels in the ground starting now. Most of the actions that we can take have long lead times. Carbon pricing is the exception to that. Carbon pricing would start working immediately as soon as it was implemented. But all the others, energy efficiency, electrification, think of electrification of cars. Now about 2% of the cars in the country are being sold are electric, and they're trying to get to 50% by 2030. So you can see it's going to take decades to get the automotive emissions out of the and so that's why scientists are telling us that we need to make significant progress this decade if we are to have a chance of meeting the Paris goals. Most of these actions take a long time to have an impact. Afforestation is a good example. It may take 20 or 30 years before the forests are the size that they are taking significant carbon out of the atmosphere. And then finally, the last point I'd like to make is it's still possible. We can still do it. I mean, there's no cause for despair. We've created the problem. We can create the solution. So with that, I want you to think about how it would feel to be part of a scenario like the one we just created that keeps us at 1.5 degrees by 2100. How would it feel? Let's take about 60 seconds of silence and think about how that would feel. And then I'd like, hopefully some of you would make some contributions as to how it feels. And I'm going to actually set my timer and make sure I don't go over 60 seconds. And it's starting now. And 60 seconds is a long time. Okay, I'll start off. When I was practicing this presentation with my 20-something daughter a couple of days ago, she said that being part of a scenario like that would make her feel much more comfortable about having children. So we need to make this happen because I need some more grandchildren. Does anybody have any other thoughts on how it would feel to be part of this? Well, under the assumption that maybe it's kind of hopeful and kind of daunting at the same time, what are we going to do about it? So some possibilities are that we could support the Build Back Better bill. It has like $550 billion in it for climate change mitigation primarily and adaptation. We could support a carbon price, which is the single most effective policy lever. One possibility might be for the city of Glendale to endorse HR 2307, which is a carbon pricing bill currently in the House with 90 co-sponsors that remits all of the collected taxes and revenues back to the people so that lower and middle income people are not harmed by the increased price of energy caused by the bill. And I'm sure you can all come up with other ideas. I mean, my idea is to be a climate ambassador and try to show the dynamics of climate change to as many people as I can. So with that, Polly, you were going to.
Well, I thought perhaps we should just ask you. We've tried to demonstrate this tool, and the tool is updated, as frequently as once a month. It depends when they have updates, but they are constantly tracking it and constantly updating it. And I wondered, because as was mentioned at the beginning, I believe it was Dan Brotman thought that it might be useful to you, and I thought maybe we could, George, stop sharing your screen and just ask you what would you like to do with this tool? Does it help you in any way on your sustainability committee? And then I thought we better stop at that point. We don't want to take up all the time on your agenda, but I wanted to open it up if there were questions to all of you about how you'd like to use this tool, and maybe George and I can say yes, it could be useful there, or maybe no, it's not useful.
Well, thank you for sharing this tool. It's great that it's free. I think that's a big plus, that just anyone could go online and see how these different things interrelate. It reminds me of some of the building efficiency modeling tools I've used in my work, and in how you can just change one little thing and either the building fails or it gets way more efficient, So it really reminds us of how there isn't just one answer, that it's got to be a collection of answers and collaboration and solution searching and so on. So it was very interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, by the way, I put the link to the simulator in the chat section early on in the meeting, but the chat section seems to have gone away. So I don't know if you still have access to it or not, if you're interested in it.
Well, it was sent to us as part of the agenda, so I played around with it a little bit before the meeting even.
Okay, good.
Now, question about what we got in the agenda is what we saw the full version, or is this or are there two versions? Is there a public version and the version that you used? Okay. So the full version is available to the general public.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
good to know.
Yeah, I also want to thank you for sharing this tool with us. It's very illuminating to see how things play into all this. I think for us here at the local level, it would be really helpful and cool to have a tool like this that factors in our local decisions on the climate. And I know that, and I think everybody here realizes that no matter what the city of Glendale does, we're not going to see a change in that needle for the 2100 year globally. But if we can see a tool like this, perhaps for a shorter time span and for impacts that are real to us at the local level, but also indicators and data sets that are also from the local level, would help us as advisors and our council as decision makers to determine, we've been talking about budgets, where our limited funding can go and what it can support to maximize our sustainability efforts. So, if there could be a marker for electrification of buildings within our city and how that could impact our local climate, that would be something that would be tangible for our decision makers to wrap their minds around.
I don't know of the existence of a tool like that, but I sometimes like this tool. This tool can be used by comparing different policies and then seeing which ones on a global scale would be more impactful and thereby deduce which ones on a local level would be. But I agree, it'd be lovely to have a local tool. I don't know of that, but George and I can definitely ask and see if perhaps other cities have, like perhaps LA City has some other tools that they use.
Great, thank you. Again, thank you so much for sharing this tool with us. Do we have any other comments or questions from the commission or staff?
That was great. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight and sharing this tool with us. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having us.
All right. And with that, shall we move on to the next item?
Next item on the agenda, under reports information, 5B, Sustainability Commission Work Plan.
Thank you. Chairperson Buttrosoof and Sustainability Commission. We have mentioned in the last couple of meetings the requirement for the Commission to develop a work plan. So what we aim to do is to provide support to the Commission in that process as they look to develop the work plan. And so what we've provided here today is maybe a process that the Commission can go through to develop the work plan. We've also provided examples of work plans from commissions, from sustainability commissions from other cities. If within the examples there is something that the Commission finds that is particularly relevant to them and how they'd like to see a work plan developed, if they'd like to let us know, then as we work with you to develop the work plan, we can follow those models and that processes. In essence, the discussion today is just to provide some guidance to staff of how the Commission may want to proceed with developing this work plan, and to maybe also develop a tentative schedule for doing so, and then we can go away and manage that process and try and get that set up for you. So offer you assistance, and then you provide us direction of how you'd like to go around doing this and putting the work plan together. So we have provided, as I said, a number of examples. And the examples all seem to be fairly similar in terms of that they describe the mission of the Commission at hand, like you were talking about a little bit earlier today, And then they specifically defined certain priorities within that, within those priorities, such as community outreach, for example, what the commission would want to do. And I think the benefit of developing a work plan for the commission is, again, as we discussed a little bit earlier today, is through identifying the commission's priorities. The commission can identify, potentially then make recommendations to City Council to have fundings for the commission to be able to carry out and reach those priorities within the work plan. So along with what we know we're going to do with the Climate Action Adaptation Plan, we know that's going to be a much longer process. But I think what this will help the commission do is put together a plan for the next 12 months as we're developing the Climate Action Adaptation Plan, so the commission can set itself its goals and its funding priorities for the next 12 months as a climate action and adaptation plan is being developed. And I think another benefit of developing such a work plan is we can then circulate that to other commissions, to department heads within the organization, and then to provide them a heads up, say, these are the areas that the commission is interested in working on, then we can then work through their staff contacts to get information back to the commission on those subjects that may be key interest areas to the commissions. For example, the transportation plan, if that became a priority area for the commission to work on, we could then work with community development to make sure that information regarding that plan is funneled to the commission. So I think in terms of communication internally to other commissions, communication internally to other department heads and to other staff, I think it will bring a great benefit to the commission going forward. So with that being said, I'll leave it up to you and take direction of how you'd like to proceed and what direction you'd like to give me.
Thank you, David. Do we have any comments or input from commissioners?
You're right in terms of the similarities. The content of the three reports may be similar, except one definitely stood out for me as easiest to read and comprehend, which was Bloomington, Minnesota. And one thing that I particularly like is for each area they have timelines, which was very easy to, to comprehend, grasp, and that way you know whether you've met the deadlines and what's coming up. But I think before that, before the stylistic preferences, I think the commission needs to get together and decide what should be included. What are some of the topics that are a priority for us, for the residents, for the city, so that we can, get that included. Whether it's a special meeting or we can devote one of the meetings strictly for that. I think we need to decide what should be included in this plan. But stylistically, I think the Bloomington one is one that stood out for me. The city of Pasadena was a little dry, a little monotone, but contents-wise, it was there. But you also have to make it easy for the layman to read, to understand, to absorb. Fellow Commissioner.
I also was impressed with the Bloomington one. I thought it was very thorough, but it was a little bit overwhelming. I mean, I don't want it to be as basic as the Eugene or the Pasadena, but I do think a special meeting would be warranted to put it all together.
I like both the Bloomington and the Eugene. It's going to be difficult coming up with this because we all have diverse interests and backgrounds. I think we probably need to, priorities probably should be set drawing on the cap and then looking at the old greener Glendale. Or another suggestion, Alec, might be that each of us come up with a one-pager about the areas we'd like to see and discuss that, or a short list and discuss that at a meeting or have a special meeting. rather than try to hash this out from scratch, that might be, it's just one suggestion for trying to get a handle on this. It's so broad.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, it's broad, and that's one of the things I also liked about the Bloomington one is the way they broke down the categories, which is what LEED does. They have like, energy, is one, and the water and transportation, location, sorts of things. So something that's tweaked a little bit more for our specific cities' needs, and just to try to break it down to bite-sized pieces, if you will, and that we can digest, so to speak. And I think that would help a lot, and just trying to use that one maybe as a starting point rather than reinventing the wheel. For example, I really liked the Bloomington one on the energy one, specifically for natural gas and electricity. There was a section in there where they have a goal to support the city council, community boards, commissions, and staff requests, including but not limited to 1 to 4 unit residential air sealing and insulation plan. That was something like I was talking about last month of like reaching out, starting with lower income communities and seeing what can be done. I know there are existing programs, but as far as like scaling those up, because we did hear from GWP, I know they have those, but I think a lot of people don't even know about them, or they think that because they're not super low income that maybe they don't qualify, something like that. I actually had that energy audit done where they come to your house and they, look at everything. They even have this giant fan that they bring, and it sucks all the air out of your house and finds leaks and things like that. And this was quite a while ago. They gave me a compact fluorescent light, which they don't do anymore, but they would be LEDs today, I assume. But I thought it was really nice because they bring the solutions to the person. They don't expect the person to run out and look for the solutions. It's sort of like what I heard someone on the news today talking about, like with COVID, like, why don't they just send test kits to everybody? Why do they just send you instructions on how to get one? Just be, they're assigning work to people that maybe they don't know how to do or can't do, or there's some barrier for them to do it. But just saying, hey, sign up here or knock on doors and say, here's some LEDs or something, or just trying to make it really simple to do for people, no matter what. As I mentioned in previous meetings, there's huge populations in Glendale that speak a language other than English at home. But if somebody knocks on their door and hands them some LED light bulbs, I'm pretty sure they'll screw those in, and they'll figure out what to do with them. So things like that. And I like that they were mentioning some of these like benchmarking tools and things like that were cool. And then also the promoting the residential energy efficiency. Like right now they're working on the draft housing element, which mentions the word sustainable or sustainability 17 times, but doesn't actually get into any detail on it at all. And no benchmarks, no specific goals, no quantifiable, measurable, weighted, or they don't even define what they mean by sustainable in that. And I found that disappointing. A couple of times they referenced the Greener Glendale plan, and so when you go to that looking for information on how this, and it's one of the 6 goals of the housing element is to provide affordable and sustainable housing, and yet they don't say how to get there, and it seems to be only about programs to make affordable housing more sustainable. Well, Glendale, unfortunately, doesn't have very much affordable housing. What about the other 95% of housing in the city? So I feel like we should be more involved in that plan than we are, considering it's one of the key strategies of that plan involves sustainability as one of the mechanisms to achieve the plan, and also one of the goals of the plan, and yet no one's come here at all and spoken about this. And the deadline for public comment was a couple days ago, and here we are. So, and this is going to guide residential development in Glendale until 2029. So I just feel like the ship is sailing on that one, and that's unfortunate. So that's all.
Right, Commissioner Werner, that's a very good point, and I think, again, laboring the point, by having this plan, we can get that information in front of those relevant departments sooner, so they can get that information to you, understanding it's a priority for you. So yes, I think there's a lot of benefits of doing this. And community development is going to be coming to the Commission in February, March, so just as an information perspective.
Okay, well, the deadline for the plan is in February, so for them coming at March, then it's no use to even bring up the housing element. So if we could talk to them before that, I think that would be a lot more effective, like January. There's a statutory deadline on that, and it's in February.
Yeah, I also like the Bloomington model. I am curious how this will play out as we're working on the climate action plan in parallel. But I'll trust your judgment for staff to help us kind of guide us through this process to develop our work plan. So do you feel you have the direction that you need from the Commission?
I do. I think I'll try and set up a retreat for the Commission in early January. Maybe not on the weekend. It'll still have to be an open meeting. It wouldn't have to be necessarily be televised. Could be a study session for the Commission to start to prioritize your areas and put this together. And then soon as we have the consultant on board too for the climate action adaptation plan, we'll get them in front of the Commission as soon as possible so they can talk about their plans, and then hopefully can start to marry things up as much as possible. So I think that's the way for us to go.
Great.
One thing, for example, that I would like to see in the plan is for each department, what is the short-term and long-term goals for sustainability? What are some of the targets? Like my colleague mentioned, what are some of the benchmarks they're trying to hit immediate term, I would say within 5 years, and longer term within 10 to 15 years? That way we know, whether they're in a year or two, if they haven't made any inroads, we know we're falling behind. So just a one-stop shop, easy to read. What are some of their targets? X percentage of vehicles electrified, for example.
We can get that information.
Yeah, I'll support that too. I think we do need to lean on our departments and have this kind of exchange to better understand where we are and where we're going. And I think having regular updates would be helpful, not only for the community, but for the Commission as well, to understand exactly where we are. So I like that approach too.
Quick question. This is probably jumping too far down the road at this point, David, but I know in Los Angeles, we have to do a lot of CEQA analysis, and we're proposing bans or even on request policies for items, like food utensils and things like that, for fear of, rather to stave off lawsuits. But most smaller cities tend to fly under the radar and just do categorical exemptions for bans that they adopt. Do you know what Glendale's history with CEQA has been in that regard?
Chairman Bartrasuf, members of the Commission, Commissioner Pinkerton, our planning department, in conjunction with the city attorney's office, we work on all private and public actions that are discretionary, undergo some level of CEQA review. If they qualify for an exemption, the city attorney's office works vigorously with those departments to make a narrative finding that is factually based in order to qualify for that exemption. So it's not an exemption is not something that's taken lightly, for example. And if we frequently do initial studies to make a further determination whether or not a project proposal that is discretionary, what level of environmental impact it might have in any of the 20 impact categories that we're required to study. So it is a very vigorous approach and respect for CEQA, which is incorporated into the boilerplate formats for our staff reports that go before the city council, so that all departments, even those that are not necessarily involved with development projects such as community development or public works, for example, on a more regular basis, are made aware that even the expenditure of funding that may have a reasonably foreseeable environmental impact receives some level of CEQA analysis. So I want to assure you that we take the California Environmental Quality Act very seriously, and that we do engage with it and ensure that the correct studies are undertaken so that we comply with that law.
And I by no means meant to imply that you don't take it seriously. I just know I think Los Angeles goes to an extreme. But so initial studies, okay, that's interesting. That's a less expensive, typically shorter path. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments on this item? Yes, Rondi.
Mentioning the Bloomington study again, but there was something that was in there I'd never seen before, and I thought that's a very interesting idea that's worth discussing. But there was one that's called Time of Sale Energy Disclosure Ordinance. So apparently this would be, if you were selling your house, that somebody would come and do like an energy efficiency analysis, or like when you buy a refrigerator or a washer, dryer, whatever, there's like an Energy Star label. Well, this would be like an Energy Star label for your house, and would say, how much it costs per year to run this house. And I thought, what a great idea. I'm not a huge fan of like making people do that when it's already expensive to sell a house and things like that, but just as an incentive for someone who is selling their house to say like, hey, look how much, more efficient mine is than that house next door that's selling for the same price. So, and I know right now with the housing market being what it is, things don't sit on the market very long, but I just thought that was a unique idea and a way to incentivize homeowners to invest in those energy upgrades, because there's a chance that they could get that back when they go to sell the house later.
No, that's a good point. That's actually very common in Arizona in extreme temperatures. Buyers typically request 2 years of energy bills in the desert.
All right, thank you. If we don't have any other comments, let's go ahead and move on to the next item.
Next item on the agenda, 5C, Earth Day Planning Update.
So I've just got Chairman Bartos, Sustainability Commission, just got a very brief PowerPoint just updating the work we've done on the Earth Day event. If I can get this to work. Okay. Tree planting was one of the activities that the Commission wanted us to look at. So we were working with Public Works and their staff to see if there's a possibility to combine the Arbor Day and Earth Day events. We're just beginning those discussions right now. So just want to let the Commission know that those talks have begun. Can you go next slide, please? We've also connected with Public Works Integrated Waste Management about the Earth Day, the collection drives that were mentioned that the Commission wanted us to look into. The participants would potentially exchange goods. Items not exchanged could be donated to not-for-profit organizations, and unclaimed items would be recycled or disposed. In the spreadsheet that the ad hoc committee prepared for the Commission, I think the idea was to establish, maybe have bins around the city in different areas, collection bins, and on campus. In discussions with staff at Integrated Waste Management, their recommendation or idea was maybe for us to connect with Glendale Community College or Glendale Unified School District and look at one rather larger central connection where people could come, where we could set up the swap shop, have roll-offs, just have the capacity and the space for the charities to set up their trucks and their trailers to take the goods in and everything, and for us roll-offs to manage the unwanted and unclean materials. So if you want to go back, Vlad, please, sorry. We've began to investigate a budget under the new franchise agreement. The franchisees would have to provide us the roll-offs and everything in order for us to collect the materials. So that would be of benefit to the commission as we look to develop that plan. So, so our next, we're reaching out to Glendale Community College right now to begin to have those discussions with them. If that is the commission would like us to go down that route, or whether you prefer for the original idea to have various locations around the city.
Do you want us to comment per slide?
It's up to you, or we can do it at the end.
I'll just be real quick about that one point. I'm imagining a scenario at Glendale College where this type of drive would take place at the garage.
Potentially, yeah.
Which is not very accessible other than driving. Okay. So I do want to make sure that we're mindful of if we pursue a singular location, that it be accessible by walking, biking, and taking transit. And to me, it would be great to have something here, for example, at City Hall grounds, the way we purpose the courtyard outside. We have a Christmas tree there currently. Would be a nice central location, but also the GUSD headquarters parking lot would also be a great visible space that people passing by could see very easily. So that would be kind of like a maximum exposure kind of opportunity. Okay. There's also Artsock Plaza, which we always have programming and events at. If there's a church along Broadway that we could partner with, something that has high visibility once again. So, and then of course there's the parking lot at the Civic Center near GCC if we want to go in that direction. But yeah, lots of opportunities and hopefully one that we can walk and bike to.
Good. Thank you for that.
I'd like to echo that. I think the main GCC campus is not the best site, and maybe their campus on Garfield, but I agree. I don't think that's the best site.
Perfect. Thank you.
Also, could I suggest that they also have maybe a giant shred bin sort of thing? So a lot of people collect paper items, bills and things like that, and they don't want to just throw them in the trash, or maybe old bank statements or something, and they tend to accumulate. They're flammable, or someone could get access to them and have someone's identifiable information. And yet it's very expensive for a neighborhood association. My neighborhood association looked into that, and when we saw how expensive it was, we decided not to. But I have a feeling the city already has an account, and maybe they just work something out where some bins are made available at this. I think you would get a lot more people showing up because we all have bills and things to throw away, right? So it might help drive foot traffic to this as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I can remember doing a shred event at the last place I worked, and we managed to work with the shredder. It's like $5 a box. Whatever's in the box, just bring the box, and so it's a huge discount. But yeah, absolutely, we can work on that.
One thing that I would suggest, given that Glendale has, is it 4 waste management companies now serving the city?
We have 4 franchisees.
4 franchisees. In a lot of jurisdictions, those franchisees, as part of their PR, will come do that service for you free of charge, as long as they have their truck with their logo in the background. So, I would reach out to them. I would be surprised if they don't do that.
And in fact, now that you bring that up, I was looking at our new hauler and their rules and restrictions, and we should incorporate some kind of e-waste and hazardous waste. Maybe hazardous waste is a little bit more challenging, but I know for e-waste, if I were to take something to the facility on Chevy Chase, a policy changed a couple of years ago where now you have to pay a fee to dispose of your e-waste at that facility. And perhaps this can be part of that plan to provide free e-waste recycling at the Earth Day event. That just came to mind, but it might be some incentive to get people to dispose of their e-waste properly, but also to come to the event.
Yeah, we'll look into all of those and report back to you at the next meeting. Another suggestion from the ad hoc committee was a pop-up park, so to utilize a space that's maybe used as a parking lot or something to show what it could be. We met with Community Service and Parks and the Glendale Parks and Open Space Foundation. They're having an event on April 2nd on the Glendale Narrows Riverwalk to promote that park and everything. And in discussions with them, they like this idea, and they would like to meet with the commissioners and maybe potentially take a walk along and visit Glendale Narrows Park and maybe identify a potential area where this could happen. So if the commission would like to go forward with that, I can set that up too.
Now, is that in the context of their open house, and do they want to find a pop-up place in close proximity to the open house, or are we speaking more broadly citywide?
I think their intention was to promote Glendale, that particular park, and to potentially have it done somewhere in that park. So that's my understanding.
Yeah, I think the intention with the ad hoc committee was to, and this was piggybacking off of really what the Parks Commission has been working towards, which is to identify and advocate for new park space in South Glendale. And for those that haven't been following the Parks Commission, they did do an assessment and analyze various city-owned lots in South Glendale that could be future park spaces. And so I think our intention with this one was to really utilize a parking lot and have a pop-up at an actually viable location that the city could pursue or is pursuing. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but Lot 11, as it's named, next to the Armory, is a lot of interest. So I'm not sure how much value there would be if we were to create a pop-up park next to an existing open space that we already have. That doesn't really get at the intent of this particular request.
Okay. Next. And again, another suggestion from the ad hoc committee was a community bike day. Again, in discussions with the Glendale Parks Open Space Foundation, they would be willing to, as part of that part, to begin the bike event at that park and then decide where we want to take it from there. So they'll be willing to work with the commission on that too.
And I'll just say real quick, I volunteer with Walk Bike Glendale, and I know the folks at Open Space and Parks Foundation that would assist with that. So that's something that would be easy to do, and I would support.
And another suggestion of the ad hoc committee was community composting. We are currently in discussions with LA Compost to establish 2 demonstration compost lots in the city. So I think as part of that, there'll be a great opportunity for LA Compost to talk about those lots, talk about their composting program, and then to educate the community on composting too. So I think Dunsmore Park is one potential location, and Shoal Canyon, I believe, is the other potential location for these compost areas. So I think that'd be a great idea to work with them on that, and because they have all the expertise on doing that. And it will draw attention to it, and then we can register people to be able to bring their food scraps to one of these two locations. So I think it'd be beneficial all around.
Can I ask, I'm sorry, I have a quick question. Are those two locations part of an existing arrangement or agreement with LA Compost, or is that?
So, great question. Thank you, Chair Bartrusif. We met with LA Compost and we did site visits around various sites of the city. So, between Community Service and Parks and LA Compost, they felt that these are the two best locations in terms of the space they offered, but also in terms of there was water available, so the other amenities were available, and also easy access for the residents to come in, drop off, and leave too. So they very much were in the driver's seat saying these are locations that would work for us in our program.
Thank you.
Oh, I wanted to mention something on that as well. So to Chair Botcherself's point earlier about Glendale College being, a little out of the way for folks, I was envisioning a number of these at the neighborhood level where you could just even walk there or just take your car or something, and that they would actually hand out some of these bins at that instead of making people, sign up and then wait to get it. And they would save staff time and labor also if people just picked up their own and they didn't have to get them to people, I think, too. But also they could partner with the numerous neighborhood associations we have in the area, and they could help publicize it, get people to go, that kind of thing, too. So I think it's a opportunity to partner with various neighborhood groups, and we do have lists of the neighborhood associations, and I'm a member of the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council, so I could set you up with contacts for the different neighborhood associations if you so desire.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Other items that I have not had time to address yet are the litter cleanup, night at the movies, and the art installation. I hope to do that over the next 3 to 4 weeks, and next commission meeting, report back to the commissioners on where we are on those issues too. And that is the end of my report.
Great, thank you so much. Any other comments or questions before we move on to the next item? All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next item, please.
Item number 6, Sustainability Office updates. 6A, Climate Action Plan update.
The never-ending climate action plan update. We have finished the draft language of the climate action plan. We have circulated it internally for comment. That comment has come back, so we will be incorporating those comments into that plan. So we're getting very close to having it ready to go out and begin to hopefully get some people to respond to it. We've also identified a number of organizations and consultants that do this type of work. So we're beginning to get that list to make sure that we get the information out to them when it's ready. So I'd just like to remind the commission that there will be probably no commission meeting on January 6th. January 6th is Armenian Christmas, which will be the scheduled date for the next commission meeting. But that being said, there will be a special meeting, hopefully, in January, where GWP will present on the draft EIR of Grayson. We're just waiting to find out what date that's going to happen. And when we have the date, we'll reach out to the commissioners to make sure that the date works for all of you and you'll be available to come to that. So that is all I have.
And to be clear, David, that would be a Sustainability Commission meeting only with
That is correct.
GWP? Okay. And with respect to the climate action plan, do you still intend for that to go out this month? And what is the response period? Is it 30 days, 60 days? What are you guys shooting for?
It's 30 days response period.
Okay.
And the aim, yeah, we're working diligently to get that wrapped up as soon as possible and to get that out into the market as soon as possible.
Great. Thank you for that
What's the
update.
budget? I'm sorry, go ahead.
At the 320,000,
Okay. Thank you.
but we don't advertise that.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, David. Are there any questions or comments about this item? All right. Let's move on to the next item.
Next item on the agenda is the adjournment. May I please have a motion and second to adjourn?
I'll second.
We're adjourned at 7:47 p.m.